Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The Spa in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is Freedom Fighter. Amazing people like you share ways to ensure your freedom physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-given knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and giving a voice of freedom to those who are also looking to have their best life. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Dr. Carol Parker Walsh, founder and creator of the Career Rebel Academy and the Midlife Rebel Community. She is an award-winning career and personal brand strategist for high-achieving women at midlife, a TEDx presenter, author, international keynote, and member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Carol is also Newsweek's Expert Forum, a career expert at AM Northwest. She has coached Grammy Award winners, Paralympic Gold Medalists, executives, and 6 to 7 figure professionals and entrepreneurs. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is so good. I'm so curious. How did you, working with midlife women, how'd that become your sweet spot?
Yeah, I think it became my sweet spot because it was my experience. So I was in a massive car accident some years ago, but I was in my 40s. So I was at midlife, and it was in a time where I was experiencing a little bit of, not a crisis, but I just was at a place in a time where I knew what I was doing wasn't what it was, what I wanted to be doing. And I was thinking and exploring maybe some other options, but wasn't quite sure if I should or if I could even understand what it is that I really wanted to do when I grew up, if you will. And there's so many pressures that happen in midlife because you have responsibilities. I had children and, I'm thinking about their future in college, and I had established myself in my career. And, so there were so many practical reasons to stay where I was, but feeling a need to do something different was always in the back of my mind and in my desire. And it wasn't until I was in this car accident that I experienced, and which was a near fatal accident. I mean, I was, in a wheelchair for 6 months. I had, a lot of surgeries and things of that nature from it. But I remembered at the time when I was working on the weekend like I usually do, and I was coming home on a 2-lane road, heading home, seeing these lights come at me, wondering, what do I do? Because it was a 2-lane road up a hill, and to the one side was a drop off into a ravine. The other side was oncoming traffic in a hill. What do I do? But I heard a voice as if it was in the car next to me that said, turn now. And, in a split second, I'm thinking, turn where? Because the options were less than optimal, but I did turn and still got hit. But the point for me is that I survived. And what permeated for me over and over again after that accident was hearing that voice, turn now. And it made me think that, how many times do we hear that voice to say, make a turn, make a move? I'm not happy, do something different. This isn't what you're meant to do. And I know I was definitely hearing it. And the reason that I think that we stay the course and stay the path is because it's what we know. It's what we're comfortable with. It's the devil we know and not the one we don't. It's the path of least resistance, and on and on and on. We can justify it 20 different ways why we should stay put. And we do that because the options of making a turn, making a move, doing something different, stepping into the career you maybe want to do or the life you want to have, we don't know what's on the other side of that choice. And what if it's the wrong choice? Or what if it's a choice that leads us into a direction that we didn't think would take us into that place? But I realized through that experience, what kept coming back to me was that experience that even if the choices may not seem optimal either way, what absolutely is not the best choice is to stay the course. Because while I would have not been here physically, I think a lot of us die mentally, spiritually, and emotionally because we don't make the move. So knowing that, having that experience, having that really be like a continuing mantra and feeling that I was going through, I knew that there were other women in that same place, and I wanted to be able to help them in the process. So once I kind of walked through what that would look like to step into that work and bringing in my doctoral work and everything else that I was doing, I knew that I wanted to help other women who were hearing that voice but felt paralyzed by not knowing which option they wanted to choose. And so that's what set me on the path of doing this work, and specifically working with the population in midlife, because it's such an interesting time of our lives that
Right.
is unlike any other. And so it's one that we really have to navigate in a way, I think, unlike any other.
Right. Well, I just listening to you, I'm smiling because I'm thinking of this, like, these crossroads that we all come into, and this is a divine moment, right? Where you actually, you hear the message and you choose whether or not you're going to take that path. And I'm seeing so many different analogies of, crossroads and feeling, paralysis, whereas, this accident caused you to have a sense of paralysis, being in a wheelchair, having life-changing things. And we get to have that choice of to step through it and do something different, or to stay stuck and stay where we're at. And you, as a professional woman, I mean, you went through a lot of training in your careers, from being, an attorney and, professor and HR executive, a dean. I mean, these are all very professional things where you put a lot of hours into, the schooling and training to do that. There's a part of us, I think, that has us stay stuck in that, because it's like, I did all this work to get here, right? And you talk a lot about the sunk cost fallacy around that. Can you talk a little bit about how having all of this education, how you stepped into, for sure, going into this and not staying stuck and actually listening to that voice? And how did you weigh all of those things in your head?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question, because to be honest with you, it was the reason that it took me so long to make the transition. I mean, so I had the accident in my late 40s, and it wasn't until I turned 50 that I decided to really jump into what it is that I wanted to do, which is establishing the work that I'm doing now. And the reason that it took me a while to process that is for that exact reason. That sunk cost fallacy is real. I did invest all this time and energy and years, into my career. I was at a high point. I was making a significant salary. I, had all the accoutrement, if you will, that comes with success in your career. And it was challenging to look at all that. And in my mind, I thought what I was doing was throwing it all away to just go chase a pipe dream. And that's what I realized is the really challenge, that you have to shift your thinking about what this process is. And most of us approach it thinking we're throwing everything we worked on, all of those years, all of that just in the garbage. And now we have to start over. And that cannot be further from the truth. What I had to realize is that I'm not starting over. I'm not discarding and discounting all of that work and experience and education. But what I'm doing is leveraging it to use it in a different way. And so I had to shift my thinking around this entire process, that it was me stepping into a higher iteration, pulling all of those gifts and all of those talents and everything that I've done, and thinking about how can I leverage it to step into what makes sense for me, so that I wasn't starting over, that I wasn't starting from scratch, that I didn't have to go from making what I was making to abject poverty. In fact, I remember my daughter asked me that when I shifted careers, like, are we going to be poor? Like when she was younger, because that is what our mindset is. Like, we live in this binary society where it's this or that. You're either successful or you're not, or you stay the course or you change. And I'm here to say that it's not an either or proposition. It really is an and. I know this, I have this experience, I have this education, and I can do multiple things with it. I don't have to just do this with it. I can do other things with it. And so when I learned to tap into what were my not only innate gifts, talents, skills, and abilities, but also the added level of education and skills and experience that I had, what would that look like into something that really made sense for me, that fit me, that didn't feel like an abandonment of everything, but felt more aligned with who I was and what I wanted, then it became clear to me what it was to do. And that's what I really help my clients do, is to understand that you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're just, pouring a little more hot water in that tub to like get the temperature up the way it needs to be, or add a couple of bubbles in there to make it, or some bath salts or whatever. That is not an abandonment of a process, is really taking a deeper look at it to really ask the question, what do I really want to do with everything that I have? And then beginning the process of stepping into that.
Love it. Carol, this is just so refreshing. And I know that a lot of our listeners are just going to take a deep breath into this, because that is the fear, right? That you're throwing all these things away. But when we look at no matter what we've done in life, it leads to our experience. It's what makes us unique. It has us stand out in the world, and being able, as you say, to leverage that and to look at like, hey, I'm not throwing all this away. This was my experience. This was my life that led me to here, that now lets me look at the next chapter of what it is that I'm here to do. And you talked about changing your mindset, right? And how you look at things. And, when we're making changes and things happen, there can be a lot of fear around those changes. You've mentioned about how you use neuro type tools, right, for the mindset to be able to help you get through some of that fear. Can you share some of those tools and how you move through fear?
Yeah, it is capturing the narratives and the belief systems and the thoughts that we're having in our brain that we just accept as truth. So a lot of the fears that we have come from a faulty belief system, or, what we call sometimes a thought error. And like, for example, one of those thought errors is, if I make a change, I'm abandoning everything that I have. So what we have to learn to do is really capture those thoughts that are holding us back, that are limiting us, that are bringing up more fear, more disbelief, more challenges, and really question them, challenge them, and really ask, are they true? What I know to be true is that whatever we believe, we look for evidence to support that. And so if we can start shifting the programming, if you will, that we've done with our brain, saying, well, this is true and this has to be true and this is the only way to go, well, we can start shifting that programming. We can actually create new neural patterns, new thought patterns to believe something different that will allow us to step into a different iteration. And so that's really part of the process, is a cognitive kind of behavioral way of really capturing those narratives, those thoughts, and those beliefs, and really examining them and not just accepting them. And that's the biggest challenge, because we've lived with them for a long time, and to challenge them to say, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not the way it has to be. Maybe that's not the story I have to tell myself and live with for the rest of my life. If we can gain that level of awareness to say that maybe there's something different I can do here, or think differently, then it allows us to have a different kind of feeling and emotion around what we're doing, so that we can take actions that leads us to a different result than taking actions based on the faulty thinking. If I think nothing is available to me or it's not possible, I'm not going to take action to even explore if that's true or not. But if I think, well, it may be challenging and I don't know all the answers yet, but I'm going to still step in that direction and figure it out, then that curiosity will help us take different actions that actually may yield to something very different. Right. And so I think the problem is that we try to stick with the same faulty thinking, hoping we get a different result, which is actually, right, the definition of insanity. It's like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But here, what you have to do is think differently so that you can hopefully get a different result. But you can't stay locked into that same way of thinking that, well, if I just do different things, I'm going to have a different outcome. But if I don't believe them, it's not going to happen. And you won't take the actions that support a different belief system until you change that belief system.
Right, right. Well, it's funny because, a lot of times we don't question our belief system. It's like how we grew up, and it was what we heard from teachers or parents or, religious upbringing, or all these different things that put in the input of what we believe. But when we start looking at that, and I love the word that you use, curiosity, because we use a lot of that, with our clients, of, just being curious of, what if what I thought was not correct, or what if there was something more to it, or, asking somebody else, what do you think about this? And the more we stay in that inquisitive place, that allows our mind to expand beyond just that limited thinking that we can get into, the things that can, disempower us and have us not stand in who it is that we're truly here to be. Which reminds me, one of the words that you use that I love is rebel. And tell me, why rebel?
Yeah. Well, yeah, first of all, I love curiosity. I think we all need to tap back into that childish curiosity we used to have around all of the things that we thought we can be and do. And I think we've lost that. We've kind of been beaten out of us over the years of just life. And I think going back to that is so powerful, particularly at midlife, because and a lot of us have just resolved to be a certain way. and have let that go and thinking that's for the next generation. So we need to tap into that. And for me, being a rebel is almost, it's really rejecting the status quo. It's rejecting this idea that just because I'm this certain age and have achieved a certain thing in life, that I have to just stay the course until the end. Right. It's rebelling against this idea that what we want, what we think, course correcting or changing isn't a valid proposition for you just because you've reached a certain age. And now we have all of these responsibilities, like we've reached this adulthood, right? I know we have mortgages and 401ks and maybe aging parents and kids going to college. We're tucked in between our younger and older self. And so we're not quite sure, which way to go. Do we just resolve to the older way of, just ride it out to the end, right? And then and some of us have a mentality that if we don't do that, then we're trying to be younger than what we are, not holding on our responsibilities. And so for me, rebelling is rebelling against societal, cultural ideas or standards of what you should do, and learning how to embrace what you want to do and letting your choices and yourself be the priority for a change, which honestly in our society does not say that that's what we should do at midlife. It's like make room for who's next, as opposed to, no, you still have a lot of time on the clock left. You get to decide if you want to stay the course or do something completely different. And to do that for a lot of, and I primarily work with women, but to do that for women at midlife it really feels like an act of rebellion to do that. And so I'm like, embrace that inner rebel and let's go for it.
When you were saying that, it reminded me of the title of an old movie, Rebel with a Cause, right?
Yes.
And so just having that cause, having that reason to step forward and know that you have more. I mean, there's so many ancient societies where they go to, the wise people who've had the experience, and that's where they go for, for anywhere from healing to advice to whatever. And we don't always embrace that. So I love the rebel of going against that and going, wait a minute, these are the people who've seen a few things, right? They've experienced some things, and we have a lot to learn from them and to be able to go from that. And with that, people have a lot of reasons and excuses, and some of it is a sense of security. Talking about, your daughter saying, are we going to be poor, and the concerns of family and the people around you going, what are you doing, kind of thing. All the excuses and things that people, bring up and have all the reasons of why they shouldn't do something. Why is it that they turn to you? Why is it that they choose you to step into looking at the world different, to be that rebel, to look at things differently at midlife?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there is so much naysayers, and I think that is why they turn to me, because what I hear more often than not is that it feels like you were in my head. Like, this is exactly like you're saying out loud the things that are rolling in my mind, but either I didn't have the courage to say, or I'm fearful to say, or I have said it and got shut down by my family and the people around me, thinking that, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind? Are you just in a midlife crisis, or whatever the case is? And so, that's why for me, it's so important for me to put my message out there and to talk about it a lot, because people aren't having that conversation. And I know even for me, when I was going through it, social media wasn't what it was then. So, there weren't a lot of outside conversations that I could just see or be on a fly on the wall and listen to. And so people weren't talking this way. But once I started talking about it, I realized that it was resonating with so many more people than we wanted to even to admit ourselves. And I think that's what happens. And because by nature, we are pack animals. We want the approval and acceptance of our peers. We want to be liked, and we don't want to be put out of the village because we're doing something that's odd or crazy or something of that nature. And what I realized that often what happens is that people are comfortable with us being where we are. And when we shift that, it disrupts their comfortability. And because it's unruly for them and they don't know how to manage it, they want to get you back in line so that they can feel comfortable, right? Because we connect and vibe off each other, and we have relationships, and people kind of got to know you in a certain way and as a certain person. And when you change that, it does kind of send a ripple effect, and people don't know how to process it. So if you're lucky enough, you're with people who are like, ooh, that's fun. That looks interesting. Let's go for it. But more than not, we're around people who are like, are you sure? Does that make sense? Is it something else you can do? I always say people can't see beyond their own limitations. And so if I don't
Right.
believe it's possible for me, there's no way I'm going to believe that it's possible for you. So out of love,
Right.
kindness, and whatever, and a little bit of selfishness, I'm going to try to dissuade you from doing something that I can't believe could be possible for you. And that's really challenging. And I think what the women,
Right.
when they connect with me, what they see is that I'm telling them that actually it is possible. And let me introduce you to other people who have done it. Let me talk about how I've done it. And let me help give you a plan and a process that can help you see it, that you can do it for yourself.
Right, right. Well, there's so many indicators that people around us, they want to do it, like you said, out of love and protection. But anytime we step up and step into a bigger version of ourselves, the people around us, either they're going to step with us or they're going to feel uncomfortable, right? And they want to be, like what they say, what's the example of like the crabs, pulling everybody down because they want to all stay
Yes.
together, and not let that one, go ahead of the crowd, and keeping everyone at a equal way that they can relate to, right? Because they may feel a fear of losing you and you becoming this person that they don't recognize anymore, which means they have to change themselves.
Yes.
So when people are coming and they're looking for something different that you're doing, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you've created around that, because you've got your Career Rebel Academy, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I realize is, because we are pack animals, because we do need the support and connection. And I think women particularly work so fabulously in community and in collaboration with each other. I think one of the things that's so powerful about the Academy is that it creates a community that people can come into and see other people who are in the same struggle, in the same fight, moving in the same direction, so that you can be empowered and encouraged and in support of other people in that same process. I think what's so important when we start to listen to that voice to say turn and try to make those moves that feel awkward or odd to other people around you is to find those spaces of community, so that you can have like language, like experience, like fears, and be able to talk about that. And for me, that's one of the signature things about our program, is that we create that container, that space for women to be able to do this work and do it together, so they can emerge out of it, with the level of support that they need to be able to step into that next iteration. In addition to that, we have a framework. I like to call it my AAA framework, that we work through to be able to ascertain the knowledge of self, to really tap into that zone of genius, to really set the vision for where it is that you want to go, not only in your career, but in your life. Because for me, your career is just a piece of the ecosystem of your life on a whole, and you want to know where it fits. You want to have a vision for what you want to have for the rest of your life, and you want to know how your career can support you in that process. So for me, it's not just about the career. It really is about you as a whole person and how it fits, so that you can do work that's meaningful and valuable to you, because you're clear about what's meaningful and valuable for you. Right. And then from there, we build, we kind of amplify the message. We build that branding, that brand messaging around who you are, so that you can then have conversations about what it is that you're doing intelligently and confidently with other people, so that you can start creating the opportunities that you want to have for yourself and building those relationships to do that. And then we move into what I call the activate stage, which is where we start creating the strategic alliances, building the plan of action, dealing with the challenges that come up, having solutions and processes to overcome obstacles or things that get in your way, so that what you're doing is really systematizing your success. You're getting the tools, the mindset, the work, the strategies, the tactics, everything that comes along with it. Because I believe it's both the inner and outer game. It's both the mindset work, but it's also some of the tactics that you need to do in order to step into that next iteration of who she is and what she's doing and the meaningful, impactful work that she's doing in the world. So in addition to the community that we've been able to put together, we have a framework that really helps the women move through it to get the successes that they need, so that by the end of our time together, I'm a big advocate of, teaching you how to embody this work, to build the confidence, to have what you need, so that in every iteration in the lifespan, you're able to tap back into that and make the change. I don't believe in a career or a job or the perfect job. I believe that in every stage of our life, we choose to realize or showcase our talents and gifts in the way that makes the best sense for us in the time of our life that we're in. And so I try to steer people away of finding the ideal job and understanding how they want to realize and showcase their gifts in the world in the time and space that they're in right now that makes the best sense for them. Because who knows in 10 years from now what's going to make sense for you. And you may want to shift and change. And if you're tied to a job or a title or all of that, you'll struggle again with trying to see the breadth and depth of what you can do in the world and be able to apply it someplace else. So for me, that's what it's about. I use the word career, and I think people sometimes, it can have a limiting view where people think, well, it's resumes and interview prep and things of that nature. But when I think of career, I think of the meaningful work you're meant to do in the world. And whether that's called a profession, a vocation, or whatever you want to call it, it has to be defined by you, but it has a bigger connotation than just the work that you do at one particular place, at one particular snapshot and moment in your life.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's so important. I love that you referenced to the, you know, the inner and the outer work, because, you know, the thing that always remains the same, like you said, is jobs can change. You know, look how much has changed in the world, you know, all of these things of how people have identified themselves. But when you get really clear about who you are, because you're the one thing that's the constant, right? What your values are, how you show up, what you want out of life, what kind of impact you want to have. When you get clear on those kind of things, you can maneuver between, you know, jobs or entrepreneurship or volunteerism or whatever those things are, because you're showing up and you're upscaling yourself in all of that, and you're creating that. And I love that co-creative process that you have with that. Which reminds me, one of the things that I love to ask my guests on the show, it's kind of a fun thing, is because we are creative beings, is that we live differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our office. So what's your favorite room in your home and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I have to say, during the pandemic, I had my dishwasher, which I think happened to a lot of people, I realized during that time. It overflowed and caused water damage. And so my whole downstairs had to pretty much get remodeled and redone. So they had to get gutted and put it back in there. So the living room, the family room, and the kitchen have been redone, and I love them. so I love spending, I do love my office, but I love much to, you know, my daughter's always like, get out, you know, and my husband sometimes is like, you spend too much time in this room, but it's so beautiful and I love it. So I spend most of my time in that family room, kitchen area because it's just fabulous.
You know, I love it. And, you know, I bring this up because, you know, the spaces that we live in, right? The things that restore us, that give us energy, that have us connect with the people that we love. I mean, this all impacts who we are and how we solidify, how much energy we have and all these things to go out into the world and do what we do. So it just always puts a smile on my face to see what people have created in their own space. And I've heard anything from like their closet, like just a small place to get away from everybody else in their family, to, you know, open spaces and being able to connect. So I think that it's really cool to be able to have that. So I just want to circle around to something that you've said that I think is going to be really important for our listeners to kind of key in on, because you've talked about, like, through your research, that about the struggle that we have, right? Because how we identify ourselves in society, about having permission and about having courage and this sense of being who we are really meant to be. And we can push up against what society wants us to be, what we hear on the news and all these things, versus what you from the very beginning, you talked about hearing that inner voice and what we're being called to, you know, whether it's what God's telling us to do, whether we're listening to that, all of those different things. Talk about that struggle of being, you know, kind of pushed between what others are trying to have us be versus us stepping into who we're truly meant to be.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is a struggle is a great word for it. And again, I think the reason that I choose to work at the population with midlife women is because you have to think about, this has been 40, 45, 50 years of living under this way of thinking, these societal pressures, this dialogue in our mind around how we should be, how we should show up, whether it's messages from your parents around, you know, you have to get a good job. This is at least mine. You have to get a good job and you stay there until you retire. And that's what you need to do because you need that security. Or once you land something, it's foolish to let it go, and, it's irresponsible, and you need, just all of these messages, and not to mention the overarching messages that women generally get as well, that have caused women generally to not show up powerfully, to play small, to not own their power. I remember my mom, I was raised by a Southern belle who grew up in the Depression, and her greatest desire for me was to find a husband who could take care of me, so I'm definitely, I'm a rebel. I was definitely always a rebel in my mother's mind from that, because I always rejected that. And thank God I had a father who taught his girls to be strong and independent, which is very fascinating of the two kind of paradigms that I grew underneath. But it was her desire that, for me, what a sense of responsibility would be to have someone who could take care of me. So if you were raised in those ways of thinking and belief, or she always told me too, that not to be too smart in class, because, boys don't like that. I can't outsmart my husband if I do find one, so I have to even play down or play dumb. And I just think about that was the message that she had, to think that was the greatest thing she could do, was to discount pieces of herself, to not show up in ways that were really authentic and true to herself, because she had to play a part in order to find success and security. And so when that has been part of our life and part of our makeup and being and belief systems for so long, it is hard to unravel that and to start listening to ourselves and letting that be the truth. And even knowing if we're really listening to ourselves, or if the voices in our head still our parents or our aunts or a teacher from school or things of that nature. I even remember another occasion in college, I was like ranked number 3 or 5 in my class. I was on the honors list, who's who, dean's list, so on and so forth. And I remember my counselor dissuading me from looking at Ivy Leagues because she thought that would be really hard for me. And I'm thinking, like, instead of encouraging me to dream big, she was really trying to tell me how to play small. I went to a nun and all girl Catholic school. And so I just think of all these messages that we've probably gotten blatantly or even subtly, to not show up, to not trust ourselves, to not trust our voice, to not believe that we have the ability to do certain things. That is a lot to unpack and unravel in order to then start listening to our voice, let alone stepping into doing that work. So it is a process to really go through that. So I would say, please be patient with yourself. Start to just question everything, to see if it really is something that you believe and want to hold on to, and find a community that will support you in the process. Get a coach, get something other than just your own mental dialogue to be able to help to unravel and unpack all of the stuff that we've been fed, because it really is a process. I liken it to the movie The Matrix. I love analogies like that, but it really, for a long time, we've been plugged into a matrix. And it's time to unplug. And that unplugging process, if you're familiar with the movie, is a little discombobulating until you really get a handle of what's going on, until you step into, as I love to say, being the one for you.
Right. Love it. It's so good. Well, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. What's the best way they can do that?
I think a great starting place is always my website. So you can go to www, and you have to put the W's in, carolparkerwalsh.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you go on LinkedIn and look me up there, you can always, those are, I think, 2 good starting places, because I tend to show up pretty predominantly on LinkedIn, and my website will give you all kind of free resources and other ways to kind of listen to me and follow me and see what I'm really about.
Perfect. And we'll put those links in the show notes as well. And as you know, our theme for this year is freedom fighters. And in what way are you being a freedom fighter in the world today?
I feel like my role and my job as a freedom fighter is to free the mind and to free the independence of midlife women to be able to make choices that are right for them, to be able to live their lives unapologetically and on their own terms.
I love it. Thank you so much, Carol, for giving us your time and sharing your wisdom. And I love just this burst of energy and direction that you're giving to women, where we say midlife, but I look at it as it's just like the world is wide open to you at this point.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
You got it. And to our listeners, thank you so much for spending your quality time with us and sharing in the conversation. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now.